Welcome to the Inside Syracuse Basketball Podcast. I'm Mike Waters. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Dave McMenamin, an NBA reporter for ESPN, who was a manager on Syracuse's 2003 team. I talked with Dave about his years at SU, his memories of the '03 team, and its recent reunion weekend, along with his thoughts about Carmelo Anthony and how he spotted Jim Boeheim walking alone in New Orleans after Syracuse's championship win over Kansas.
Welcome back to another edition of the Inside Syracuse Basketball Podcast. We got a really good guest today, a guy I've known for 20 years now, and it's really amazing to see where he's gone with his career. It's former Syracuse basketball manager, I love saying that part, and current ESPN NBA reporter Dave McMenamin. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mike, and it's a pleasure to join you as always.
Yeah, it's really going to be fun to talk. We chat every once in a while when we get the opportunity. One reason I reached out to you to join the podcast was just a couple weeks ago, Carmelo Anthony retires. And I don't know if it was a real surprise or oh my goodness, Carmelo Anthony is done, because he didn't play this past season. But still, it gives us an opportunity to talk about the former Syracuse greats' basketball career and put it into perspective. What were your first thoughts when Carmelo did announce his retirement a couple weeks ago?
Well, certainly he didn't necessarily get to go out on his own terms. There was talk last summer after he finished a pretty individually successful season with the Lakers that couple teams that he'd played for in the past, the Knicks and the Nuggets, perhaps having interest in bringing him in, and he could get season number 20 and kind of have the storybook tie up the loose ends to his career with a bookend of a place where he'd played before. But obviously it didn't materialize. I think what ended up being perhaps the unanticipated bookend was the fact that the last time I saw you in person was the 20-year anniversary of the Syracuse championship team. And little did we know, and maybe some of us suspected a little bit, that it could have been Coach Boeheim's last home game at the Dome. But it kind of ended up being the swan song for both of them, and pretty appropriate to have them both kind of share that moment as one of their last active basketball memories. I think that's it. I don't think either side would have scripted it necessarily that way. Coach Boeheim certainly would have wanted to go out on an NCAA tournament run, and Carmelo would have liked to be on an NBA roster. But still, to come back to kind of their most important basketball moment and share that together, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny the way things work out. Maybe not necessarily the way a couple folks wanted them to, but they kind of worked out well. If Carmelo had been playing in the NBA this year, he's not able to attend that 20th anniversary reunion at the Dome, which was on Syracuse's senior day, the last regular season game. And also, if Jim Boeheim's retirement doesn't happen the way it does, which was a little awkward, maybe we get into that a little bit. Less than a week later with the whole post game press conference down in Greensboro. But, instead, his last home game at the Dome is going to be not only a win, which is nice, but also a game attended by all the guys that was on his national championship team from 2003. That's not a bad happening.
Yeah, and not only that, you throw in Jerry McNamara and Nikema Warwick's jerseys going up to the rafters. It was, for me, one of my most cherished basketball memories, and talking and reconnecting with a lot of those guys. Akeem and I stay in touch over text. We see each other a couple times a year as the NBA circuit has our paths crossed. And obviously Carmelo I covered last season, but some of those guys I really hadn't seen in years. Queth and I text from time to time, but to be able to see Queth as a man, a father, a leader in business, and still have all those same qualities that caused us to look up to him back in the day. I don't know. It was really cool. And I think everyone involved there could feel that. It was a charged kind of energy to the atmosphere that weekend. And, that quite frankly, that's going to be a better send-off than Carmelo would have gotten playing for perhaps a random NBA team. There was a call for him to be the veteran that gets added to the Memphis Grizzlies to try to settle down that locker room. Are Memphis fans going to give him a send-off like he got in Syracuse? I don't think so.
Right. You know what? We need to reset this for folks that didn't pick up on it right at the beginning. You're a Syracuse grad. When you were here at Syracuse, you were a manager with the basketball team. And I believe it was your sophomore year was the 03 season. So you were right there with all the guys as they, with Carmelo as a freshman, Jerry McNamara as a freshman. You mentioned Queth Dwaney, Craig Forth, Josh Pace, Billy Edlin, all those guys. Those were your guys. What was it like coming back that reunion weekend and not just the Carmelo guys, but all the other guys that had very few opportunities to get together as a group until then?
Well, I know I texted with you a bit about this, but Billy Edlin was the most impactful, emotional, kind of cherished part of the weekend for me. And I think most guys would say the same thing because Billy's, not had the easiest go of things since he finished with Syracuse. And, he wasn't involved in the watch party on the Friday night prior. And, we were kind of talking amongst ourselves, like, we'd all love to see Billy and he's going to be able to come or not. And apparently Carmelo made it his mission to make sure Billy was included and Billy would feel the love from the Syracuse community. And so while many of us were hanging out prior to the game on Saturday in, one of the suites, just catching up and having some food and drink, Carmelo was in a different part of the arena with Billy. When we all kind of were staged by the dome ramp to get ready to go on to the court at halftime, that's when Carmelo brought Billy down. And all of us were just so excited to see him. Many of us, we hadn't seen him in person in, more than a decade. And he was overwhelmed by the moment. He was shedding tears and giving hugs, and all the love in the world was being passed around with that group. And then we get to the final moment when we're going to go on the court. Queth, I believe, is holding the championship trophy. And when Queth's name is called, he puts the trophy in Billy's hands, and Billy goes out there and hears the roar of the 20,000 plus fans. And so, yeah, it was really cool. And then also that's such a testament to the guy that Carmelo is, that, he could have been bigger than that. He could have been, that's a guy I haven't known for years. No, it's his old roommate. And it wouldn't have been complete for him, Carmelo, if he didn't have Billy there. And so he made sure it made it happen.
Was there any inkling, Jim Boeheim in his post-game presser after the Wake Forest game in Greensboro 5 days later, when we're asking him about his future, retirement plans or whatever, and he says, well, I gave my retirement speech last weekend. Now, I don't know if I believe that entirely. I
don't either, Mike. And listen, you know him just about as well as anyone can know him, I think. And I'll say this, I think everyone knows this, but I respect the hell out of the work you've done covering the Syracuse basketball program. We also know that Coach Boeheim can be, he's a very clever man, and sometimes maybe too smart for his own good. And so maybe he was straddling the fence a little bit there. I had a conversation with him on Friday night prior to the Wake game on Saturday, where we were talking about the challenges of the college coaching landscape in 2023, but him expressing confidence in terms of like, well, you hit the transfer portal hard and get veteran players, and that's a pathway for success. So to me, it was a guy still talking about the possibility of still coaching the program because he's so competitive. And
so no real inklings, no hints that like, hey,
I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't give it to someone else in the group, but there was, I was in a couple of the kind of group gatherings where we had a bunch of the former managers and former players and former coaches and current coaches all together in like a green room setting. And coach was over the moon, gracious and certainly, the one thing that sticks with me, he said that, the 5% of critical fans in Syracuse are very vocal and you're going to hear from them, but they are not Syracuse basketball fans. Syracuse basketball fans are the 95% that are loyal and have been here supporting this program. And look at what we see in the arena. Those are the fans that still fill it up, even though, this team isn't bound for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was acknowledging, yeah. And that was acknowledging, I guess, the whatever pressure or whatever you want to say, the narrative that was building that was suggesting that he should hang it up. But again, I don't want to speak for everyone on the team because he may have told someone in a private moment that this was going to be it.
Well, if he did, they kept it quiet. Whoever he did, if he talked to anybody, they're good.
Yeah.
All right, so we do that. One other thing about your career at Syracuse, not really at Syracuse, but your college career, is after that 2003 season, obviously you can't follow up. You can't do better than that. So you decide to take a year abroad. You went over to the University of Limerick in Ireland. And you not only go over there to study, you played ball. Tell me about that. Did you intend on playing ball in like your semester abroad?
Yeah, so I was, I love basketball. I still play it several times a week now. I was a marginal high school player, but like I knew how to be a good influence on a team. And so I came to Syracuse with grand visions of being the Rudy of Syracuse University and walking onto the team, and quickly realized that players like Rennell Herron and Andrew Cowie were at pretty high level compared to what I was bringing to the table, and that they had years of eligibility ahead of them when I got to school. So the walk-on route didn't really seem too feasible, and I worked with the team as a manager, and part of the kind of, it's not written in the job description, but you can't really be the head manager of Syracuse basketball without a car because just the job requirements of running errands and helping guys get to classes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't have a car, nor I was going to be getting a car. And so I knew the kind of head manager route was also kind of close to me. So I'm like, well, all right, as a junior manager, I've already had the championship experience. Odds are I won't be able to make it as a walk-on. I knew that there were some invited walk-ons that were scheduled to come my junior year. And this was a chance, to study abroad. My older sister studied abroad in Melbourne. So it was always in my head that that's a great, enriching experience to get away. And that's the time of my life to do it. And B, my buddy and I, a fellow Syracuse guy, Chris Dugan, who was a heck of a ball player, we were looking at either going to London, where several of our friends were going, or going to Barcelona. And then this Limerick thing came up, and we got in touch with the coach, and he's like, we have tryouts for, American players. We can only have 2 Americans on our team. But if what you guys are telling me about your skill level, we're probably around D3 American hoops. So you have a good tryout, you'll be on the team. And Chris and I were the 2 Americans to make the team. And Chris was like one of our really good players, like started a lot of games, but I got a consistent role. I might average 5 or 6 points per game, but I was playing regularly, which was awesome to be in the throes of competition. And also beyond that, I didn't have a lot of money. And so just going on bus trips to go play in Dublin or go play in Cork or go play in Galway, I got to see the country for free. So yeah, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And then fortunate enough for me, when I came back my senior year, rather than Bernie Fine and the Syracuse program being like, you shirked your responsibility, we don't have a spot for you, they welcomed me back as a manager. And even I got to travel some, kind of being the alternate head manager my senior year. So it was awesome.
That's really amazing. I think that's great. You went overseas, you did your year abroad, but you also got to play basketball. And now you can tell guys you cover in the NBA, yeah, I played ball in college.
This is actually a cool thing. Kevin Young, who's now the associate head coach of the Phoenix Suns, who just became the highest paid assistant in the NBA today as an assistant coach. He played professionally in Ireland, and he knows it was called the Burger King Super League. And so he knows what Irish basketball is like. And so we've connected over that. And yeah, lo and behold, I didn't think that would ever benefit me in my career. I thought it was just like my own personal kind of basketball time. But, I got to connect with one of the bright young coaches through that experience too.
How amazing. All right, so let's circle back to Carmelo, who was the real reason you and I wanted to get together and talk on the podcast. It's I feel like when people start to like evaluate Carmelo and his career and his standing among players on all time and everything, that if you are either a Syracuse fan or you lived in Syracuse or you covered Syracuse even, so I'm in this group too, that your perspective and opinion about Carmelo is completely different than a lot of the folks out there in NBA cities around the country who saw that, like, he never made a final. He never won he doesn't have a ring. I think people in Syracuse have a completely different opinion. What is, from your perspective, since I think you can share both, what's that perspective, the college Carmelo or the NBA only Carmelo, and where do you kind of evaluate him?
Well, it's hard for me to be unbiased about this. Obviously, I saw how great he was in college up close, and it was, again, what a ride to be have a front row seat to witness. But my pushback, and I've had this conversation ad nauseum for 20 years, is that did Michael win without Dennis and Scotty, and did Kobe win without Shaq and Powell? And then who is Carmelo's blank? Who are his Hall of Fame teammates in their prime to help him win? He never had it. And so he ran into Kobe on a mission in 2009 in the Western Conference Finals, coming off the finals loss to the Celtics in 2008, gave him a series, go 6 games. Maybe the Nuggets could have won it if not for a couple faulty inbounds plays that Trevor Ariza was able to, steal in late game situations. But look at his teammates there. Kobe had Powell and Lamar Odom in his prime, and obviously Andrew Bynum was a burgeoning all-star back then. Carmelo had nothing of the sort. I mean, this is not to cast aspersions at guys like Marcus Camby and Kenyon Martin and J.R. Smith and Dante Jones and the like, but it wasn't the level of teammates. And then you go to New York, and his best team in New York, he loses to LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and now a guy who's proving to be a top 5 coach of all time, and Eric Spoelstra, where Carmelo has some great guys on his team, but they're aging. It's Jason Kidd towards the end of his career. And so I just don't think it was really a fair argument to make. We're so used to the idea of if you're like a singular name superstar that you just do it all your own, but you got to pay attention to who surrounded these guys. And Carmelo was thrust into that conversation because his individual skill was so good.
Yeah.
But, you want to make an argument against him, you say, well, you forced your way out of Denver. You go to New York. New York had to give up so many assets to get you there. And what you could have seen this coming because what was going to be left for you to play with. That's the one thing I guess you could say where, maybe the business of basketball wise, he didn't make the most savvy decision in that moment. But in terms of being a competitor, in terms of being one of the game's all-time great scorers, number 9 in NBA history, I think his NBA career is alone a Hall of Fame career. Then you throw in maybe the most impactful freshman season in the history of college basketball and throw in the most decorated U.S. men's Olympian in basketball ever with 3 gold medals and a bronze. And it's an open and shut case. And anyone who would suggest he had an underwhelming career, honestly doesn't know basketball.
when you've covered the NBA now, which you have basically since you graduated from SU, you've been with ESPN since '09, and I know before then you were with NBA.com. Does your relationship with guys like Carmelo and Hakeem Warwick, from your Syracuse days, has that helped you at times over the years?
It actually has. Carmelo and I, it's funny because we were only school together 1 year, and quite frankly, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. Like, it wasn't like Carmelo was around campus a lot after the win over Kansas, so we didn't really have that much time together in school. But early on in his career, we did a couple sit downs, and he was one-on-one very helpful with me. And just over the years, seeing him at a game, and he's sitting courtside at Summer League, and I chat with him, and then he has some teammates sitting next to him, and then there's a natural conduit to make those connections. And then Akeem is, a very soft-spoken, kind of tough to know kind of guy, but once you know him, he's awesome. And so, even this last year, I skipped a Lakers game, or was, given permission to miss a Lakers game to go to the celebration, the championship celebration. And Anthony Davis was giving me some flack for missing the game. And then when I told him what I was doing, he lit up because he had played with Akeem in New Orleans at one point in his career. And, I guess it gives you a level of credibility that you're not just any other reporter that only has that perspective that you're bringing to the job, that you've kind of,
right,
you've seen it from the team perspective to some degree.
Sure. And if guys see like Carmelo and Hakeem reaching out to you, not reaching out, but giving you time, do whatever, the other guy's got to be taking note of that, going, well, if he's okay with Melo, then he must be okay. And so we go. All right, so let's go back to that senior day weekend. What stands out? What were the inside moments that were really cool for you guys?
Oh, I shared this on Dan Patrick, but it's still like it says so much about Carmelo 20 years later. But we used to, get some drinks at Conrad's, or I guess it was Chuck's at the time, and you're getting $5 pitchers to, we have a toast after the watch party, and it's Carmelo pouring from the wine label that he owns. So just to have that, growth and just incredible career off the court is impressive. I think there was, just neat hearing, seeing someone like Josh Brooks and seeing how he's maybe as fit as anyone that had played on that team still, and he works in sports as I think he's a physical therapist, I want to say, or probably a sports
chiropractor too. Yeah,
a chiropractor. There you go. And seeing that in the way that team has served him, that love and passion and connections, I'm sure, are still part of his career today. I don't like it's hard. I don't want to like call out individuals. I'll start missing people, but I don't know. And also hearing Coach Boeheim, the way he talked about that team. There was a press conference. I guess it was post game. I think probably you asked the question, Mike, but it was something along the lines of like, there's a lot of great teams, but this is really a great collection of individuals. And Coach Boeheim can be an excellent salesman and make things sound great, but also he doesn't always get too mushy about stuff. And you could tell it's a team that means a lot to him. And that was another thing in the kind of green room hangout that we had after the watch party. He said to the group that my career wouldn't be complete without this team. And for a guy, who top three, number 2 all time in wins when he retired, and synonymous with the city of Syracuse, and really the model for longevity in the sport. I don't know. In all the 20-win seasons and tournament appearances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it just to see him kind of let down the competitive side and just be grateful and live in the moment there, because you're not really allowed to do that. It's a ruthless business that he chose to be a part of for 40 plus years. And that's why I loved the documentary that you guys did, because you got him kind of talking in that same kind of mode. Because I don't think he allows himself to go there too often.
Yeah, it's funny. As you're talking about that senior day weekend, the reunion weekend, yeah, I had a lot of those same moments with the guys on that team when we put together that documentary. When I was interviewing Queth Dwaney and Josh Pace and Jim Boeheim and all of them, and to get some of those stories about the relationships and everything that went on with that team. It was a lot of fun for me to look back on the team. I got one more question.
I have a quick thing that popped in my head. Well, one, I love the Gary Hall, Jeremy McNeil stuff in the documentary. That was awesome. But so Leah Rosenholtz was a fellow manager, same year as I, and we're at the game against Wake, and we're sitting in seats behind where the Syracuse team bench is, and Leo goes, "Hey Dave, do you know who this is?" And it's a guy probably in his mid-20s, and I'm drawing a blank. Like, this is Jaquan. He was the ball boy, and he was 7 years old back then when the team was playing. That championship team was playing, and that was like, wow, like what a cool moment. And I was very whomever made that happen, who made sure he was there. That was really cool, because when everyone, I kind of watched people afterwards make that connection, like, oh, I remember when you were just yay high. That was a very full circle. He was a full circle representation of how long it'd been since the championship.
Yeah, I saw him there at that game day too, and I couldn't believe how they find you. It's
exactly.
You were a kid, like you said. Now, okay. So that reunion weekend, did you guys make it back out to Marshall Street like you did in your undergrad days?
Yeah, we did. Couldn't quite handle it the way I handled it in my undergrad days. It's a little bit harder, but no, that was great. I can't admit, Orange Crate, I think, is the name of the newer bar on Marshall Street, and Carmelo Anthony graciously opened up a tab and was taking care of everybody who wanted to wet their beak a little bit, and we're all sharing stories and taking pictures, and it was fantastic.
He was okay drinking something other than his own label.
yeah, he was all right. And seeing him, and Bay Frazier was there, who was his longtime, I guess, mentor, manager, and Bay was just hanging in the back and watching his guy relish in the moment, and just seeing Carmelo decked out in Syracuse gear, and I feel like he's been doing that for years. And I love it, because you don't have to be too cool for school. And Carmelo's I guess it's weird for a grown man to call another grown man cool, but Carmelo's cool. He has a cool factor to him. And so by him wearing Syracuse gear, I guess that's cool too. You can do it. You're allowed to.
So where does life take you these days? Carmelo's retired. The Lakers are done. What are you doing?
I'm down in Miami for games 3 and 4 of the finals. So I'll get to experience a little bit of this tasty matchup, which I think the national narrative was, oh man, we missed out on what could have been Lakers versus Boston, 17 titles versus 17 titles to see who gets number 18. But this might not have the rich history behind it, but it's excellent basketball so far in games 1 and 2. And you either get Jimmy Butler, getting that elusive title and kind of entering into maybe the Dirk type of conversation, where an all-time great who broke through at the right time and his career will be viewed in a completely different light. And at the same time, as I mentioned Spo earlier, really stamping Eric Spoelstra as a top 5 coach of all time. Or you have Nikola Jokic basically announcing his dominance that could last for years to come. He already has 2 MVPs, could have a title, and he's 27, 28 years old. So it's in its own way is very appealing. The Game 2 television audience was nearly identical to Game 2 last year, involving Steph Curry versus the Boston Celtics and Jason Tatum. So that's pretty darn good. And I think we're going to get, I picked Denver in 6. Maybe we can even go the distance. Maybe this thing goes 7. And I think basketball fans will really enjoy it as they continue to tune in.
Okay, so now Jim Boeheim is retired. Carmelo Anthony is retired. What about the guy you've been covering now with the Lakers, LeBron James? I know it's dangerous to ever listen to any pro athlete in the moments immediately after the final game of a season, especially a playoff loss, because that's not the time to ask them or to really believe them. So you're covering LeBron James next year, right? He's coming back. He's not retiring.
Yeah, I mean, I reported within the week, I think they got swept by Denver on a Monday, and on Friday I reported that, a source close to LeBron told me that he expects him to be back with the Lakers and fulfill his contract for next year. I think we are legitimately in the year-to-year territory now, though. Dennis Schroeder said earlier in the year that LeBron told him that he'd like to play 25 seasons. I think there would be days that LeBron feels that way when his body's feeling amazing. And then there's going to be weeks when the team is struggling, or, he's dealing with a torn tendon in his foot or the groin or the back or the knee. And that becomes more of a pipe dream than a realistic scenario. So, I have zero doubt he'll be back with the Lakers. I mean, fine, I'll say 5% doubt he'll be back with the Lakers, but 95%. I'm sure he'll give it a go for year 21. And, obviously they have a very competitive group. Before the sweep, they went 18-6 through the end of the regular season, through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, plus the play-in. Like, that's a 750 win percentage. That would be the best in the NBA over the course of the entire season. So there is, a reason to want to keep the core intact, but you always got to get better. It's that Phoenix is going to be looking to look at last year as an aberration and really cater that team around Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and obviously Giannis Antetokounmpo and Joel Embiid remain 2 of the most dominant big men we've seen really ever in the game, and so those teams are no slouches either. And so the Lakers will have to improve, but I think there's the last season and a half prior to the trades that Rob Pelinka was able to pull off at the trade deadline were really taxing on LeBron mentally, physically. He likes to use the term spiritually as well. But I think his career, so long as it's games that matter and his body doesn't betray him, I think we'll see it beyond year 21 as well. Because competitive basketball, like, that is, I've been fortunate to cover a bunch of guys who really love the game, and LeBron fits in that category.
Okay, we got to get you out on one more Syracuse-related question from the 03 season. What's your favorite memory or funniest story or whatever it is from any time during that season? Be it after the Kansas win or maybe something at a practice early in the year?
Well, after the Kansas win, I don't even know if I've told you this story before, but I enjoyed myself. I went out on Bourbon Street, and I was 20 years old, but no one's checking IDs on Bourbon Street. So I go out with some of the guys from the team, and then I go out with some of my friends who were students who came down, and I got back to the hotel, and I'm like, a mixture of still vibing from the win and having that adrenaline and maybe still having some of the drinks in my system. Like, I got to get some food, so I go back out to get a slice of pizza at whatever time it was in the morning, 3, 4 in the morning, and I saw Coach Boeheim taking his solo walk down bourbon, his kind of victory lap. And you know, I'm sure you kind of know this, like coach with managers, generally it's you're on a need to know basis. Like he gets to know you if you've been around for a few years, but if you're one of your first 2 years, there's not too much of a relationship. But I went up to him, excitedly congratulating him, and you know, I'm one of the sophomore managers, and he's like, I know you are, basically being like, thank you, but I want to still soak in this moment. So I did tell him about that years later. He got a good laugh about it, but yeah, it's just cool again hearing him talk about how validating that night was, that team was, that championship was for his career. I actually got to witness the guy kind of soaking in the moment. At that stage, you know, he had been coaching 25 years or so, and hadn't done it yet. So yeah, I feel fortunate that I got to get that little glimpse that, quite frankly, I don't think anybody else saw.
So he's just walking by himself. All the celebrations over.
All the celebrations over, and he's just getting the chance to, you know, just soak it in.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And I can appreciate at the end of all that, him probably needing some alone time.
Yeah.
To process everything. That's really cool. And a slightly inebriated sophomore Dave McMenamin.
That's right. That's right. I had the pizza soaking it up, so I was doing okay.
All right. Well, Dave, listen, this has been a pleasure. It's always good chatting with you. And to see like the success you've had in your career, you know, that's just awesome too. Congratulations on all of your successes, and I enjoy watching you and reading you. So keep at it. Okay.
Yeah. Likewise, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks for joining the podcast.